I'm very honored to be here. Professor Akari, thank you for the introduction. Sheikh Mansour Ben Musalam, muchísimas gracias por invitarme. Many of us have traveled for up to more than 30 hours to engage in a conversation on balanced and inclusive education. And today's quinticontinental convocation organized by the Education Relief Foundation in collaboration with the Mexican Secretaría de Educación Pública had its beginning as a vision of Sheikh Mansour's wanting to address issues of bias and inequity in education by taking bold steps to reimagine the future. My topic this morning addresses issues related to mother tongue education. My comments are not meant to alienate, but rather to stimulate a reflection on the plight of global language communities who are deprived of an education because the language they speak at home is not the language of the school. My comments, I confess, do have the intent of changing the minds of those who believe that mother tongue education is not a possibility or an option. If I can accomplish changing the minds of those who do not believe in mother tongue education, my good time spent with you here will have made my trip very worthwhile. Furthermore, my ideas in support of mother tongue education are not idiosyncratic. My ideas are supported by the old but good works of those like Paulo Freire, Roland Barthes, Michel Foucault, Mikhail Bakhtin, Lev Vygotsky, Luis Moll, and younger U.S. scholars such as Nelson Flores and Jonathan Rosa. My ideas are supported by studies produced by UNESCO and the World Bank, as well as prestigious bodies such as the National Academies of Sciences. In thinking of those denied an access to an education due to mother tongue reasons, I ask, who are the victims? Are the victims the decision makers and those in power that complain of the complexity of offering mother tongue education and how this complicates their business day and makes their lives difficult? Are the victims those that are well off, enjoying the privileged benefits of wealth and power, but inconvenienced by those that are not as privileged? Or are the victims the millions that are denied access to an education because their mother tongue or mother tongues do not align with the language policies of their country? Are the victims the ones who face the consequences of poverty, hunger, poor health, and isolation because of misguided social values and misguided language and education policies that deny them an access to a balanced and inclusive education? What about you? Would you rather have a hard day at the office, or would you rather be relegated to a life of illiteracy and marginalization because of the language you speak, your social studies, and your heritage? The World Bank estimates that 50% of the world's out-of-school children live in communities where the language of the schooling is rarely, if ever, used at home, thus contributing to a legacy of ill-conceived policies and practices based more on misguided social values that lead to low values of learning and high levels of dropouts and repetition. A UNESCO report offers findings that should not be of any surprise. The report says that where instruction, curriculum, and materials are not in the mother tongue and do not take account of the child's known world, the result is widespread non-attendance, increased repetition, and low achievement levels. The report further finds that data from 160 language groups in 22 countries all over the world revealed that not using mother tongue languages was a major cause of non-enrollment and dropout. Now, does that surprise you? In another report from the Global Campaign for Education, the findings indicate that the neglect of mother tongue education is catastrophic. The report further indicates that an estimated 221 million children enter the classroom unable to understand the language that they were taught in, a language that is typically an old colonial language, a national dominant language, or an international language. The National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine of the United States just recently published a report on how people learn, learners, contexts, and cultures. Notice that the report includes context and culture as a prominent part of how people learn. Among the report's various findings, the report emphasizes that everyone brings to their ability to learn the experiences that they have acquired through participation in cultural practices in their own communities. The report also finds that culture coordinates the biological systems involved in learning and is the broader social context in which people engage in the experiences that enable them to adapt to the world and to learn. The report further emphasizes that optimal learning environments make teaching and learning relevant and responsive to the languages, literacies, and cultural practices of all students. But again, why would you find the results of this report surprising? We all know that learning first occurs at home through one's culture and one's mother tongue. When a child is born, she absorbs her body of knowledge using all her 5 senses from the entire environment within her reach. The body of knowledge she creates comes from her mother, family members, and other relatives. Her foundational body of knowledge also comes from her extended family, her grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, peers within the community. Drawing on Vygotsky's work, every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first in the social level and later in the individual level. Vygotsky's work applies equally to voluntary attention, to logical memory, and to the formation of concepts. As part of the learning during the formative years at home, children also learn to become problem solvers through their acquired mother tongue language discourse skills, such as explaining, describing, narrating, persuading, classifying, forecasting, evaluating. Say what? They learn this at home? You doubt this? You believe that these discourse skills are first acquired through a formal education because they seem to be too advanced and to be acquired within the context of the home where parents and family members may have never had the benefit of a formal education? It seems crazy, but it's true. Many discourse skills are first acquired within the context of the home. If you don't believe this, think about this. Have you ever been with a 2-year-old that manipulates you by throwing tantrums or otherwise? Have you ever been around whining children that use whatever means that they can to convince you to please their demands? Have you had the privilege of being around teenagers arguing among themselves, evaluating each other's comments, predicting what will happen if you don't get your way? Thus, a major component of the prior knowledge that children bring to school consists of discourse skills that are the basis for problem solving, critical thinking skills, and the learning of skills in science and technology. So why should children who have spent their first 5 years of their lives developing a knowledge base, language discourse skills, and a world view be denied the right to use their resources when they come to school? There are myriad reasons why misguided policies exist that deny an education to children based on their mother tongue. There are those that would argue that it's a matter of cost that makes it inconceivable to offer mother tongue education. However, a study by McKenzie and Walker found that a country saved up to $6 million in US dollars by offering instruction in the mother tongue, which contributed to reducing dropout and repetition rates among students. The same study also found in another country that not offering instruction in the home language increased the cost of education by up to 27% because of the high repetition and dropout rates. The excuses for not offering a mother tongue education often start out with issues related to cost, but there are other excuses such as the lack of materials in the home, the lack of qualified teachers, the unwieldy logistics of having to provide instruction in multiple languages, the politics of providing instruction in the home language, among others. Truly, the challenges of providing mother tongue education are real. However, it is also real that education as it currently exists basically meets the needs of a select few, but fails with a large segment of society. Challenges to mother education are real, but they're contextual and relative. It may be worth discussing why mother tongue education for a small community with an unwritten language cannot be provided the benefits of mother tongue education, even if we should. However, the challenges of cost, materials, and human resources as related to mother tongue education are difficult to accept and may even sound frivolous. For example, globally, there are more native speakers of Spanish than English. Globally, the United States is the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. But can you accept that the reasons provided for not offering mother tongue instruction in Spanish in the United States is that there aren't sufficient teachers that can teach in Spanish, that there aren't the necessary materials to teach in Spanish, and that the cost would be too high? These challenges are real, but how have they come to be? Next to Mandarin, Spanish consists of the second largest language group of native speakers in the world. English comprises the third. So how can there be a scarcity of resources for teaching English as a home language in the United States? Can you now, quickly, think of a few ways in which these challenges could be overcome in the United States to provide an education to native Spanish and speakers and bilingual students? In my remarks that follow, I would like to restate some of the ideas I've already presented. First, learning begins at home, and learning is a social event in synchronization with human biological capabilities. Learning begins at birth with a newborn's family. The learning process begins the development of a worldview predicated on language development, value, heritage, and communicative competence. Learning in one mother's tongue does not preclude a student from learning an additional language or languages. As a matter of fact, studies show that it facilitates learning an additional language. A student is more successful in learning an additional language or languages when she has developed a strong language, a strong first language. For example, students who are studying English find it easier to learn it when they have a strong proficiency in their home language. Students do not waste time learning academic content in the mother tongue. A student learns a new concept only once. Concepts transfer from one language to another. If you learn about the carbon cycle in your first language, you do not have to learn the concept again when you learn the second language. Language, culture, and identity are intertwined. When you reject or disparage a language, you also reject and disparage a culture, a heritage, a society, a worldview. You also nullify a person's existence by disparaging her identity. Identity formation is intersubjective and dynamic. A person's identity is formed not only from the way in which they perceive themselves, but also by the way in which others perceive them, and in the way in which they interact with each other and with others. Those in authority have the power to create negative identities among those that are different by attributing negative characteristics to them or defining them by the use of corrosive labels. Who has the most to gain from creating a negative identity for speakers of diverse mother tongues? Not educating a student in their mother tongue is often not about language. Many times, if not almost always, it's also about race, social class, religion, heritage, gender, geographical region, occupation, or other similar non-language reason. Arguing for education as it exists, means arguing for continuing to sustain an education system that benefits the privileged at the expense of less fortunate members of society. Who benefits the most by maintaining the status quo in education? Mother tongue education is not a choice. It's a right and an obligation. Not educating a mother tongue for educational purposes is not only a matter of the use of language A over language B. It is also about the hegemony of monolingualism, monoculturalism, and false notions about the purity of language and elite members of society. In an era of standardization, the false belief often exists that a country and a society is made stronger by having a standard language, a standard culture, and standard values. The belief in standardization supports the false notion that there should be one country, one language, and one culture because it builds a stronger society. However, what contributes to a strong society and a strong nation are values that strive for social justice and that support and accept diversity locally and globally without biases or prejudice. If we believe in public education, we must build educational institutes to educate the entire public, not only the privileged institutions, the privileged. Institutions need to adapt to the realities of the public and not the other way around. The use of English as a goal for global communication is real and visible and a viable goal. However, we cannot exaggerate its ubiquitousness. Out of the world's population of about 8 million, there are close to 2 billion speakers of English, and there are still close to 6 billion that do not speak or understand English. And of the 2 billion speakers of English, only 400 million are native speakers of English. So most of the speakers of English globally are individuals like you and me, bilingual speakers of English, leading to the fact that there are more bilingual individuals globally than monolinguals. Clearly, mother tongue education should be a component of balanced and inclusive schools. While we contemporarily extol the virtues of cognition in the learning process, it still remains the fact that learning is as much a social event as it is a cognitive one, facilitated through dialogue, engagement, and interaction among family members, peers, and teachers in a formal setting. We are here today because we support balanced and inclusive solutions to education. But can we be supportive of balanced and inclusive solutions to education if we're not supportive of equitable policies for access to education? To move forward with meeting the challenges of mother tongue education, we must reimagine education. We must redefine boundaries. We must cease to succeed at the expense of others, and we must be creative in integrating diverse members of society into the solutions that are best for them and for all. To create global citizens with humanitarian goals, we must strive to create and to connect communities from different regions of the globe through the use of technology to create communities based on commonalities and not only on political boundaries. I complete my remarks with a quote from Michel Foucault. And the quote, "Maybe the target nowadays is not to discover what we are, but to refuse what we are." And another one by Paulo Freire, "True generosity consists precisely in fighting to destroy the causes which nourish false charity." Thank you for your attention.